He was on here late Friday to discuss the possibility of war, and now he's back today to discuss the war that is underway. Behnam Ben Taleblu from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Benham, thanks for coming back to the show. I believe, based on the timeline that I've seen, while we were on the air Friday discussing all of this, the president was making the decision, giving the orders to strike Iran. You've been watching the coverage throughout the weekend. What are your reactions to the president's decision-making and how it's going so far?
Well, it's a pleasure to be back with you, and again, be back with you so soon. But, you know, the president just proved that he is as much commander-in-chief as he styles himself to be negotiator-in-chief. And he took a decisive move. And while some may say it was a gamble, the gamble already seems to be paying off. I mean, there are operations underway, joint operations, I want to stress, American and Israeli, that are designed to defang the regime of its long-range strike capabilities, go after not just the transporter erector launchers that fire these missiles, but the installations that house these missiles, as well as the launchers. And lest we forget, within the opening hours of the war, I think within the first 6 hours, it was reported that the Supreme Leader's compound was struck, and just after that, it was reported that the Supreme Leader himself died in the blasts and the explosion following the attack on that compound. And make no mistake, there has not been a decapitation operation against a sitting state leader in this part of the world that has been that successful that quickly.
Benham, the intelligence capabilities here of the United States and of Israel inside Iran are just incredible. I think it was reported that the CIA sort of figured out where the Ayatollah was going to be. You had Mossad all over Iran here, and these two countries and these two intelligence services working together for the elements of the Iranian regime that remain. How much paranoia must be running through what's left of the Iranian government right now? I mean, they are probably looking behind every door and around every corner wondering, you know, is there a foreign intelligence operative watching me right now? I mean, chances are there probably is.
Chances are there probably is, and not just watching them, but is there also a foreign drone above me? You know, it's not just the coordinating and the planning with their colleagues and partners, where it turns out one of them might be a foreign agent or a foreign asset, or in reality, probably an Iranian patriot who simply just doesn't want to see their country go down the tube and is willing to work with major Western powers to stop the armed forces from burning through the country like they already are. That might be a more proper fit, we could say, for armed forces folks who are defecting or quiet quitting or working with foreign intelligence services than to call them traitors per se, because I think the Islamic Republic is the traitor to the Iranian nation here. And then second, of course, the capability, the fear, the long-range strike capabilities, and the fear that exists due to the drone power, the missile power, the air power of the U.S. and of Israel overhead could even be sensed during the 12-day war. You know, there was even audio of Iranian missile launch teams who were afraid of firing their missiles because it would, you know, signify where they are, and that could have been, you know, one of their last moves on this earth. And that fear, plus that, you know, patriotism could foster defections, or it could foster quiet quitting, or foster more unit-level individual pressure for opportunism and survival rather than continuing to carry out the fight. Because lest we forget, this is a regime right now that is headless, but that is still fighting. There is not a commander-in-chief at the moment.
Benham, talk to me about that. I guess it was reported that according to the Constitution of Iran, a 3-member interim council takes over. How does it work right now for them? Do they have effective control, decision-making control of the Iranian military? And maybe tack on to that this issue. I'm kind of stunned at Iran firing all these missiles indiscriminately into other Arab states in the Gulf, striking civilian targets. They seem to be creating enemies for themselves by the hour. What do you make of all that leadership, command, and control, and the decision-making going on with Iran's remaining military capabilities?
Well, let's take it from the top. You don't have to take it from me. You can take it from the foreign minister of Iran, who in a recent interview, in English, by the way, said that they don't control the armed forces, that the armed forces have their own target banks and preset plans, and regardless of the status of the politics, that these guys are going to be firing at whatever they want to be firing at. So again, this is what a government official in the Islamic Republic said. So there it goes to show you how much worth and value and even really capability and credence to deliver that these folks have, because they don't even seem to be controlling their armed forces. So that really does force us into the world of available military options rather than thinking there's a quick and easy political off-ramp here. The second thing about command and control, while the focus is indeed on the Leadership Council to assume some of these major executive functions, and that Leadership Council is composed of the President, Pezeshkian, this other cleric, Ali Reza Arafi, who we can get back to talk to. Some people have said he could be a potential Supreme Leader successor. Some people say he's more of a pliable face for the hardline national security deep state. And then the third, the head of the judiciary, Ejei. These three, legally and politically, are serving in that executive function, in that kind of interim leadership council capacity. And they will be doing this up until the next quote-unquote Supreme Leader is picked by the Assembly of Experts, which is a body of folks that the Supreme Leader has helped to steer their activities through, even though they were supposed to be monitoring his activity during his time in office. Suffice to say, the name we haven't mentioned and the institution we have not mentioned is Ali Larijani and the Supreme National Security Council today. Even though the regime no longer has an actual person whose title is Supreme Leader, that individual and that institution are, in my view, at this moment in time, the most important person and the most important national security decision-making body inside Iran today. So while you have this council that is going to be in place up until you get a new quote-unquote Supreme Leader, that individual, Ali Larijani, who heads the Supreme National Security Council, is going to be the most important person for command and control in that country, and we believe he is still alive. The next thing...
Benham, let me just ask you, what kind of person is that? Is he... I mean, how do you regard him and compare him to the previous leadership in Iran?
Consummate regime insider. You know, this guy served in the Quds Force in the heyday of the Iran-Iraq War. He's educated. He's held a whole host of national security, high-ranking political positions. He was a former Speaker of Parliament. He's been all over the place. He is a deep state insider. I know here in Washington, people talk about swamp creatures, but that is the swamp creature of that kind of a regime. He's seen all sides, worked with all factions, and believes in the mission. And in so many ways, he may be more dangerous because he's a more capable person. You know, an ideological person is ideological about their end state, is ideological about their goals, but they can totally logically and rationally, sometimes eerily rationally, in a very cold, calculating way, pursue rational means to very ideological ends. And that does remind me of not just this Larijani, but the whole family of Larijanis, who are sometimes jokingly called the Kennedys of Iran, given their political and economic wealth and impact.
That's Behnam Ben Taleblu. He is the Iran Program and Senior Director and Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Behnam, tell me something. I assume you're in contact with some people inside of Iran. What's day-to-day life like right now for the average Iranian resident? If you're living in Tehran, are people out? Are they going to school? Are they going to the markets? Are people generally staying inside? What is your understanding of how life is proceeding as this war effort is going on?
Well, what we could tell with the internet being turned back on after the protests that occurred in January and really was the forcing function of the moment, you could say, was that Iranians were really trying to, stay out of sight, but really all of a sudden burst back out onto the street again, and in particular across multiple university campuses for 6 straight days before the war began to continue to chant and protest against this regime and to commemorate those young, brave Iranians who had fell 40 days ago. And they memorialized and eulogized and commemorated them. And in so doing, they actually fought, pushed back a lot of, quote-unquote street fighting on university campuses between pro and anti-regime folks in that country. So it was a small microcosm of the state and society there on Iran's university campuses. But elder folks, middle-aged folks, a lot of folks were trying not to be seen, trying not to risk the ire of Iran's increasingly policing and patrolling national security deep state, and in particular their security services. That has changed in the outpouring of celebration and felicitation of the news of Khamenei's passing, because as you know, once the conflict got underway and a lot of strikes, even in around urban centers, were felt, people in Tehran, because they remember the 12-day war, tried to flee. And Tehran is the country's capital. Greater Tehran plus the suburban areas has a population of 15 million on a day-to-day during working hours. A little bit less, 10 to 11 million if you just count Tehran proper. Many of them fled to the north or to some of the provinces during the last war. So you saw that behavior again, but then you also saw road closures due to dancing and, again, felicitations that the regime could not control once the supreme leader had been announced to be dead. And these felicitations and parties went into midnight even Tehran time.
Benham, one piece of sound just into the Scott Jennings Show I want to get your comment on. This is the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte. This happened on, I believe, Fox News a little while ago. Take a listen to what he had to say, and I want to get your reaction as we wrap up here. Cut number 7, please.
First of all, say that my thoughts are with the service members, the U.S. service members who made the ultimate sacrifice over the last couple of days. And let me also say that the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world, President Donald J. Trump, I really commend what is happening here. Taking out Khamenei, taking out the nuclear capability in Iran, but also taking out the ballistic missile program in Iran. This is crucial. And what I see in Europe, I spoke with all the key European leaders over the weekend, is widespread support for what the president is doing, and also making sure that when it comes to logistics, access, defending key U.S. interests in Europe and in the region, the Europeans are really stepping up.
Benham, are you seeing good, solid, proper international support for what the president is doing? 30 seconds.
Their support is growing. Obviously, we'd always love to see more from Europe, but let me just take the UK as a small microcosm. They were a lot more skeptical about this moving into it, and there was a lot of room for improvement in their regional policy. But look, push comes to shove, it's the Islamic Republic that has actually pushed the Europeans, the E3, and in particular the UK, into our embrace. They are now officially going to be allowing Americans to use their bases to stage operations to go against the regime's missile program.
Behnam Ben Taleblu, Iran Program Senior Director and Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Behnam, I'm sure we will see you in the very near future as the war effort unfolds. Thanks for joining us today.